Story 1. The current proposal is not that British troops should fight the war, but rather that they would guarantee any peace agreement. Story 2. My thoughts are that it is strange that the AskReddit community has become filled with new accounts continually asking questions about events shortly after they happen. It used to focus on highly charged topics. What is the purpose of collecting karma? Are there bots involved? Are accounts with karma being sold? Is there data collection occurring? Are people preparing for influencer campaigns? It is just unusual behavior overall. Story 3. As an outsider looking in, I think that all the comparisons to the 1930s neglect the ways that Europe is also beginning to resemble the 19th century again. Certainly, nuclear weapons and aircraft changed the rules. However, London and Paris fought the Crimean War to oppose a Russian autocracy invading a neighbor. If Britain believes that this will succeed in achieving the desired results, then I can see the logic in it. Story 4. The goal is to create a deterrent and increase the cost of Russia violating future agreements. Russia has broken 23 ceasefire agreements with Ukraine because there have been no consequences. Story 5. Some misunderstandings are occurring. They will not be assisting as North Korea is helping Russia. This will take place after any possible peace negotiations to ensure Russia keeps its word this time. Story 6. In the context of a peace deal, peacekeepers may be acceptable. However, there would likely be severe limitations on their ability to engage in combat. If they were to be deployed to help Ukraine fight Russia, that could lead to the start of a major conflict. Story 7. It's time. Russia won't leave unless all European Union countries join together and position 100,000 troops at the border, and most importantly, enforce a no-fly zone. Story 8. I support our servicemen who signed up to be part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, knowing that it meant taking orders to defend United Kingdom interests. This seems better than training exercises and provides value for the taxes that fund them. Story 9. I believe Britain should not act unilaterally. France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and all European Union nations should collaborate. Putin has North Korea. Everything is fair in love and conflict. This isn't love, but it definitely is conflict. Story 10. I support it. Putin is losing. You don't use donkeys to resupply the front lines if you are still winning. Story 11. British veteran here who spent time in Afghanistan. It is a far better use of our time and resources than Iraq was. Pains me to say it, but... Story 12. Well, the United States, once the leader of the free world, is now perceived as leaning towards communism, so someone needs to step up and help. Story 13. The question requires more intellectual engagement than the average Reddit user possesses. The likely outcomes are that it either escalates into a larger-scale war or pressures Russia to de-escalate so that discussions can resume for term agreements based on various factors. Story 14. I am incredibly impressed that they would do this. It is exactly what is needed in the situation, and I am glad they stepped up. Story 15. I believe we do not have enough resources to make any meaningful difference. Implementing massive airstrikes on all Russian positions and establishing a no-fly zone over Russia are actions we could consider. Story 16. Well, they are treaty-bound to support Ukraine's defense against Russia. I only wish France and the United States uphold their ends of the agreement as well. Story 17. Somebody has to do it. It is clear that many Americans are self-centered and primarily care about themselves, so the rest of the world will need to unite to keep dictators under control. Story 18. The North Koreans sent it to Russia. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Why should we be alarmed if other countries want to help the Ukrainians? Story 19. I would be happy to see United Kingdom and European Union troops in Ukraine to push Russia back and reclaim Ukraine's territory. This should have happened a long time ago. If Russia wants to escalate the situation, then so be it. No one did anything when Russia took Crimea, and here we are again. What message are we sending when we just let him do what he wants? Story 20. Not the greatest idea, but in the circumstances one of the better ones. The way this war has progressed, simply capitulating will signal to Russia and the rest of the world that Europe is weak without the assistance of the United States. It may not happen instantly, but Putin will attack Europe after Ukraine capitulates and Russia has time to regenerate its military. I'm unsure about the United States, but there is a probability of them joining the attack, making it a situation similar to Poland in World War II, though I do not see logical reasoning for that to happen. The fact that Putin is already engaging in asymmetric warfare against Europe should prove what his intentions truly are. To continue fighting this war is our only option to demonstrate the solidarity of Europe. Story 21. Britain excels at strategy. Let drones handle the combat. Britain can manage the extensive research and development needed to deploy various drones effectively to saturate an area, retreat, and penetrate the contact line. Story 22. It depends on how you define assistance. Currently, assistance might involve guarding the borders, such as the Belarusian border, to support Ukrainian troops. Given the current stalemate and the reciprocal situation, if Ukraine suddenly had its entire northern army available, that could significantly impact the conflict. Alternatively, it could involve actual soldiers fighting side by side against Russia. However, this scenario carries the risk of Russia escalating and using nuclear weapons, which seems unlikely considering they would face substantial retaliation. Another possibility is to secure a peace deal, which appears to be without major issues, unless Russia attempts to undermine it or conducts a false flag operation similar to the events leading up to World War II. Story 23. Send troops that are descendants of soldiers from the 1st Galician Division as an ultimate irony. Story 24. The United States should have done more to materially assist Ukraine a long time ago. There should be a general defense of civilian structures and aid for the wounded. I am absolutely ashamed of what we have provided in our assistance to Ukraine. Russia has shown itself to be nationalist, expansionist, religious, and intent on destroying non-Russians. It is quite literally akin to a Nazi state. We must fight them, and hopefully, when the situation becomes truly dire, we will not wait so disgracefully long again. Story 25. I believe that sending troops to Ukraine is pointless because the war is coming to an end and there is no reason to resist. Story 26. I believe that Western troops should have been positioned in defensive roles in Ukraine from the first day of the full-scale invasion. Story 27. American here. All European nations, and the European Union collectively, need to immediately mobilize and defeat Russia. Europe must act swiftly and decisively. Appeasement and a slow trickle of aid have done nothing, and Russia inches closer to European Union borders by the day. However, Russia also cannot easily defeat Ukraine and is largely being held back despite its superior numbers in arms. Even a single European nation committing to assist in the war or Europe instituting a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be decisive in ending this conflict swiftly and justly. European troops do not need to get involved directly in the conflict, nor do they need to set foot on Russian territory. But they absolutely can and should be doing more. It is only to their detriment that they continue to delay action. With American support, Russia will only grow stronger each day. Europe needs to decide whether it wants to be defeated by Russia or not. If Europe does not want to be defeated by Russia and does not want to surrender, then it must act. There is simply nothing else. Story 28. This pulls Europe into all-out war with Russia, initially through Ukraine, and if Ukraine falls, then the war moves to Poland and beyond. It's concerning, but it's unpredictable. Story 29. Look at what happened before World War II. Everyone waited for the other countries to assist, and then all the allies had to intervene after so many deaths and suffering. Story 30. As a veteran, it is merely posturing. If they did close down and engage with the Russians, Apocalypse Bradford would be entertaining. Story 31. Sure, why not? It is their decision, but do not expect Article 5 to be triggered when they start dying in Ukraine. Story 32. I believe they should use it as their immigration program, a good way to prove allegiance to the king and country. Story 33. I would love to see the French Foreign Legion securing the area. They are 9,500 strong and could defeat the Russians if they chose to. Story 34. I think it's wonderful and Great Britain is the leader of the free world now. As an American, I feel fortunate. Story 35. Let me tell you something as a Brit. My whole life I've been brought up loving World War II history and action movies. On Remembrance Day when I was a child, I asked my dad what it was about, and he told me. Since then, we watch world leaders speak every November about the importance of never letting a fascist dictator like Adolf Hitler rise to power and invade sovereign countries. We must fight against this kind of aggressor and learn from history. In my teens, I started learning a lot about North Korea. Even today, I find myself occasionally checking for new documentaries made by people who have visited there. I was stunned to learn that North Koreans from a young age are taught to worship their leader like a god. Speaking negatively about their leader can lead to multiple generations of their family being publicly executed. I learned that they have work camps, which are essentially concentration camps without gas chambers, with some babies being born into a life of slavery in these camps if they survive the malnourishment. I always wondered why. Why are our leaders standing up saying we need to help people oppressed by fascist dictators like Adolf Hitler, and yet one lives in North Korea today? Well, I mean, it's his own people, right? Not like he's invading other countries or anything like that, right? Then Russia invades Ukraine. Years after, those who oppose Vladimir Putin always seem to go missing, die in a terrible accident, or end up in jail for essentially being the opposition. I listened to the reactions of world leaders around the globe. Those in the West or NATO states stand up and describe Putin as a modern-day Hitler. But yet, we sit by and give the Ukrainians guns and ammunition. It's essentially like kids in the playground. Hit him. Go on, hit him. No, you do it. No, you're bigger than me. Here, put my rings on your fingers. Go on, hit him. Now, the answer to this is simply to let Putin call the shots. Let him decide what terms he wishes to end the war. We need diplomacy and compromise. It's really funny to me because when our leaders speak about an evil dictator named Hitler who has died, they never seem to say that if someone like that returned, we would need to compromise with them. We would need to avoid provoking them. We would essentially just shout, "Bad, bad dictator," and let them continue with what they are doing. It was my understanding that we need to stand up and confront these dictators, right? Why, you may ask, aren't we doing this? I mean, it can't be because Russia has nuclear weapons, right? Haha. Look, after all, we invaded Iraq to stop Saddam, who had weapons of... Oh, wait, he didn't, did he? Funny that. I wonder if George W. Bush and Tony Blair knew that before the war started. Anyway, I digress. Story 36 should have been sent 3 years ago. It is not just British troops. All of Europe should send them, but someone needs to be the first to stand up. The countries bordering Russia have been ready to act from the beginning, but they need support from some of the bigger players, some of which, particularly Germany, have been somewhat lacking so far. They would rather let others take the risk than face any potential consequences themselves. Story 37. I would love it if Britain took action right now, but this is obviously for a peace agreement. Honestly, I would like all of Ukraine's allies to support this initiative. I believe the best solution is for these allies to request that Russia withdraw its troops within 3 months or however long it takes them to prepare. If not, they may find themselves at war with Russia. Subsequently, they should build up their forces in the neighboring countries of Ukraine. My hope is that Russia would reconsider and recall its forces before any real action occurs. However, if necessary, they should deploy forces solely to secure those territories in Ukraine. This would not constitute a formal declaration of war against Russia, but rather support for Ukrainian sovereignty. If Russia attempts to attack elsewhere, it will escalate tensions. This is similar to when Russia sent troops to Vietnam or Korea during those conflicts, which did not lead to direct confrontations between those nations. Story 38. Would you prefer to commit troops to Ukraine now, or start building up so you can deploy a larger number of troops closer to home in a few years? Story 39. It's pointless if they are not sending troops into Ukraine to fight and push out Russia. You worry about peacekeeping after you have achieved peace. As of today, the war is still ongoing, and tomorrow it will continue. Britain and other countries discussing peacekeeping troops are acting as if the war is already over. If Ukrainian forces are not actively being attacked anymore, they can maintain peace themselves, especially since they are on edge, anticipating that Russia might restart the invasion, which they definitely would not be able to do without broadcasting their intentions. This seems to indicate that Britain does not actually want to be of practical use to Ukraine but wants to claim they did something when it is all said and done. Story 40. Ukraine does not need them. Russia is being humiliated by one of its former colonies, and we should let it continue. Putin is desperate to save face by claiming he lost a war against the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He even recovered a few Western-made vehicles, painted fake North Atlantic Treaty Organization and United Kingdom flags on them, and displayed them in Moscow to create the illusion that this war is against the West. Russia will lose this war, and the history books will show that Ukraine, on its own, defeated a coalition of Russia, North Korea, and arguably Belarus as well. This kind of humiliation is necessary to force the indoctrinated Russian people to wake up and fix their country. Story 41. As a Canadian, I am in favor of troops from Britain, Canada, and Europe being deployed. We should have done this from the beginning. Putin only respects strength, and we are not seeing that from the United States. I expect the United States will dissolve the North Atlantic Treaty Organization soon under the pretense that countries like Canada have not been contributing sufficiently. The absence of American involvement alters the situation. It is unfortunate that Trump was easily influenced by Putin. Now Britain and the rest of Europe will need to demonstrate their strength, or Russian expansion will gradually continue into other parts of Europe. Story 42. Should not be mandatory for those troops. If a soldier has issues with being deployed, that should be respected. Story 43. For Germany, the problem with this is that our constitution clearly forbids regular German troops from fighting in foreign wars. Only in the case of an attack on German territory are they permitted to engage. This measure was implemented after Germany fought in 2 destructive wars within 31 years. The first was initiated by an ambitious emperor seeking to establish a greater German empire, dominating all of Europe. 21 years later, a fascist leader aimed to create yet another empire, the third one. Peacekeeping missions are different. In these missions, troops are not allowed to use force unless they are fired upon. Personally, we should provide Ukraine with every possible support to defeat Vladimir Putin and to demonstrate to narcissistic leaders and their followers that while it may be inconvenient, the United States needs us as well. Story 44. As much as I feel for the Ukrainians, I don't want the West, especially the nuclear-armed countries, engaging in a direct war. At the end of the day, the survival of myself and my loved ones matters more to me than anything else. Story 45. Why should the United Kingdom inconvenience itself for the European Union? The European Union played hardball during the Brexit negotiations. If European Union member states want stability in their backyard, let them take care of it. Story 46. Obama gave away Crimea. Biden gave away Ukraine. Does anyone believe that Russia will withdraw from Ukraine without deploying NATO forces and forcing him out? I do not. Story 47. It's a feel-good move that will further weaken a fading world power. The UK should focus on its own problems before pawning its assets to lend out. Story 48. I am personally against it. I support giving Ukraine whatever they need, literally anything, but I believe that sending troops to assist militarily unless directly attacked is a bad idea. We do not need all of NATO involved in World War III unless absolutely necessary. However, when it comes to peacekeeping troops after a ceasefire, I support that. NATO should deploy over 100,000 troops along with nuclear weapons and air defense when there is a ceasefire. But that is just my opinion. Story 49. Bad idea. Respectfully, from what I've read, Britain has enough of its own problems. Focus that energy at home. Story 50. When the United States troops start entering from Russia's side, it will be the first time these two nations have fought in over 200 years. Story 51. It will cause a revolution as usual. Ukraine might actually become a free democratic country that way by fighting the British and driving them out. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.